Hello guys, in this video, I'm going to show you how to fetch Kobotoolbox API to web interface using Django. In a situation where you have a website and you are collecting data on customer relation and you need to display the data for public consumption, you can do that with the help of Kobotoolbox API. What you just need to do is to consume the API and render it on the web interface in real time. Or probably you are collecting data and you want to display data to your audience in real time. You can do that by using different framework like React, Angular, Next.js, Laravel, Django to consume this API, deserialize the API, consume it, and render it on the web interface. That's what we are going to be doing in this video. I'm going to be using Django, which is a Python framework for developing web applications, which is what I'm going to use to deserialize the API, consume it, and render it on the web in real time. So it's going to display the data in real time for every users. That's what we are going to be doing in this short video. So let's jump into it. So the first thing I need to do is to create a simple form. So how am I going to do that? I'm going to click on new. I'm going to click on build from scratch, and I'm going to name the form. Let me name it Django API. Django API. So the description, I'm going to leave it blank. You can write whatever I like. The sector, I'm going to use order. And for the country, I'm going to use Nigeria. Create projects, to create a project. So it's going to take us to this form builder. This form is currently empty. You can add questions, notes, prompts, or other field by clicking on the plus sign below. So I'm going to click on the plus sign. And the form is going to start with, let me start with name. It's going to be a test. The second question will be, let me use email. So email, I'm going to use test. And the third one will be country. I'm going to use country. I'm going to use country, and the country will be Germany, USA, Canada, Nigeria, and Nigeria. So we've successfully created a simple form. So I'm going to save the form. So we have these three questions. So I'm going to click on return to lists, and I'm going to click on Django API, the form, and I'll click on deploy to deploy the form to server. So we've successfully created a simple form. But what I need to do now is to go to settings to allow the form to be used by third users or to other users, in other words. So I'm going to click on sharing. So I'm going to click on anyone can view the form, so that anyone on the web can view the form and can be used by any third-party applications. So I'm going to click on this also. Anyone can view the submissions made to the form. So the form is available for anyone to make use of. So I'm going to go back to the form, and I'm going to click on open to open the form in a new tab. So now we can fill in the form using dummy data. So I'm going to use shell. For the email, I can use shell at gmail.com. For the country, I'm going to select Nigeria, and I'm going to click on submit. So we need to wait for some seconds, and it's going to display successfully submitted on top of the form. So you can see Django API 1 was successfully submitted. So I can also add another form. I can add another thing, like let me use Burner Boy. And for the email, I'm going to use burner at gmail.com. And for the country, I'm going to select Nigeria, and I'm going to click on submit. So that is how to submit form to the backend of Kobotoolbox. So now, what we need to do is to go back again to the form. I'm going to go back to, okay, let me just open it down because I may need it later. Load. So I'm going to go back to the form and I'm going to reload the form so that the form will display in the Kobotoolbox interface. You can see 2 submissions. Now, the next thing for me to do is to open the API to search for the API. So to do that, I'm going to clear off this and type in API slash v2. Now, I'm in the API route. Now, what I need to do is to click on the asset to take me to the current endpoint. Now, we have the API display in the current endpoint. You can see we have the JSON format of the API, which is JavaScript object notation. You can see it here. This is the API. So Kobotoolbox creates API in real time for you. If you have a form, it will create that API for you if you want to consume the API for any other use. So now I have the API display in the API route in the current endpoint. Now, this is what I need. I need the URL, the uniform resource locator of that particular form. You know, we've created this form, which is called the Django API. Now, API in the current endpoint, we have the URL. So this is what I'm going to consume. This is what I'm going to deserialize. So what I need to do now is just to copy this. I need to copy this, which I'm going to use later in my Django project. So now we need to create Django projects. So how are we going to do that? What I need to do is to go to the command prompt. So I'm going to type in CMD and open a command prompt. Now I have the command prompt. In the command prompt, I need to create this Django project. So to do that, I need to first of all create a directory to store the Django project. So I'm going to use mk make directory mkdir call. I'm going to call the directory. Let me slide in into desktop. Let me slide in into desktop and create a directory called Django API. So now I have this Django API created in the desktop. So to enter the Django API, I'm going to type in cd current directory Django API. So in the Django API, what I need to do is to install virtual environment. Virtual environment is like a container that holds every information that you want to separate from the desktop. Let's say you have Django installed in your desktop and you don't want to make use of that Django in that desktop. You want to create another Django for your own project. You need to create virtual environment. So it's going to hold this Django that you install as a separated element from what you have on your desktop. So it's better if you make use of virtual environment to hold every information that you want to separate from your desktop. So I'm going to create that. So to create that, I'm going to use virtual env. So it's going to create virtual environment. It's going to install that. So I need to start the virtual environment. To start the virtual environment, what I need to do is just to call the name of the virtual environment, call the env /scripts/activate. So this is going to activate the virtual environment. You can see it display on the left-hand side. So now we've created this container that holds all our information in that Django API. So what I need to do now is to install Django in the virtual environment. So I'm going to use pip install Django. So it's going to install Django in the virtual environment. So it's installing Django. So we have several applications that can be used to consume API to the web interface. But I'm using Django because Django is pretty light and it is very fast to consume API or to develop any web applications. So now Django is installed in the virtual environment. So the next thing is to create a project. So to create a project, I'm going to use Django -admin start project. I'm going to name the project, let me name it fetch. So now we have Django project called fetch in the virtual environment. So what I need to do again is to probably install a request, because I'm going to use a request in my project. So I'm going to say pip install requests. Request is used to deserialize API. So I'm going to use this to deserialize the API, the Kobotoolbox API. Now request is installed in this Django project. So let's open the Django project. So I'm going to open the Django project in the VS Code. So I'm going to open the Django project in the VS Code. So I'm going to open the new terminal, and I'm going to locate this project called Django API. So to do that, I'm going to click on Open Folder. I'm going to click on this PC, local disk, users, shell, which is my directory. So in the desktop, I name it Django API. I'm going to move this. I'm going to move this, and I'm going to open the fetch. So I moved the virtual environment into the Django project. So now we are in the Django project in our VS Code. So we have VS Code, we have other IDE, integrated development environment, that can be used to script your code, but I'm comfortable with VS Code, which is very light and easy to use. So you can use any IDE you want. We have the Android Studio. We have several of them that you can be used for scripting code. So I'm going to perform simple operation, or I'm going to do some configuration in the backend. So what I need to do now is to click on the fetch and click on the settings. So in the settings, before I do that, I need to install an app that will be used in the Django project. So to do that, I'm going to click on terminal, and I'm going to click on new terminal, and I'm going to use Python manage.py start app. I want to start an app that will be used in the Python in the Django project. Start app API. So it's going to install API, which is this app in the Django project. So I'm going to use this to render the API into the web interface. So now I have the API installed, which is the Python app. I also need to let Python know that I'm installing an app called API. So to do that, I'm going to go to the settings. And in the settings, I'm going to go to install app. So I'm going to let Django know that I'm installing an app called API. So I'm going to use I'm going to use apostrophe API dot apps dot API config. So now Django is aware that I've installed an app called API. So that app has been installed in the installed apps of Django. So if I want to make use of this app anywhere, Django will be aware that I've installed that app and I've done the necessary configuration in the settings. So the next thing that I'm going to do is to come to the template. So I want to make use of template in the Django project, which is going to be the HTML. So to make use of other third-party applications, I need to let Django to be aware that I'm using a third-party applications. So I want to make use of the HTML. So I'm going to let Django know that I'm using this third-party application called HTML. So what I need to do now is to come to this DRS and install and use base DRL, comma, apostrophe, I'm going to call it templates. So in this template, I'm going to install any third-party applications that I want to use. I want to make use of HTML. So I'm going to install the HTML inside this folder. So I'm going to come to API and create the folder called the templates. And in the template, I'm going to use HTML called the home.html, which I'm still going to show you how I'm going to pass in information into the home.html. So let me just quickly create the HTML. So I'm going to use home.html. So now I have home.html. So the next thing for me to do is to create url.py, a Python file, into the API. So I'm going to come to the API and click on this new file and call it url.py. This is going to hold any uniform resource locator that is being passed from the views down to the API. So I'm going to show you the importance of this later in this video. So now what I need to do is to go to views. In the views, I want to pass in information into the home.html, and I also need to pass the information into the URL. I want the URL to be aware that I'm passing information or the function from the view down to the web interface. So I need to do some connections, which I'm going to show you in this video. So now what I need to do is just type def home, then I want to pass in this parameter called the request, and I want to return render. Render allows us to render any information into the web interface. So render what? I want to render the request, and it should pass in home.html. So I want to pass in information into the home.html, which is this. So to do that, I'm going to create a function, which I've done. I create a def home, and I pass in this parameter. I return the parameter into the home.html. Now, after that, I need to let URL to be aware that I'm passing in information. I want to pass in information into the home.html. So I'm going to go to the URL. The URL is empty for now, but I'm going to go to the one in the Django project. So I'm going to copy the URL of this, paste it into this place, paste it into this. I don't need the admin. So I want to pass in information from this view into the URL. So I've rendered the function, which is the home function, into, I want to pass in information into the home.html. So I'm going to go to the URL and import the views. So I'm going to say from this directory, which is .import views. So I want to import anything that is inside this view. I want to import it into this URL. So I'm going to come down to this place and type in path, open bracket, apostrophe, views, dot, the home function. You can see the home function. Now we've done that. So I will clean this off. I don't need this admin. So now every information in the views will be passed into the URL. So the URL is now aware that I want to pass in information into the home.html. So what I need to do now is to go to the URL of the Django project. Now I'm going to let the Django project to be aware that I want to pass in information from view that have been registered into the URL. I want to pass it into the home.html. And I also want Django project to be aware of that. So I'm going to come down to the Django project, which is the URL. I'm going to use comma, include. So I want you to be included. So that's the meaning of that in a simple term. So now I'm going to come to the URL patterns. Then I'm going to use path, apostrophe, comma, include API, include apostrophe API dot URLs, which means that any URL, any information in this URL should be passed into the Django project, so that Django project will be aware that we want to pass in information to the web interface. Now, this is just the simple arithmetic or simple logic that we need to do in every Django project. So now with Django is aware that I want to pass in information to the home.html. So I've registered that into the URL of the API. So the API now has been included in the Django project. So what I need to do now is to run the server and check if every settings is appropriately loaded in the right location. So what I need to do now is to type in python manage.py run server. So now you have 18 API migration. So I need to use a simple logic of Django, which is to migrate every content into the database. So to do that, I'm going to use python manage.py migrate, and it's going to migrate every information into the SQLite, the Django database. Now, after that, I need to run Django again. Django manage.py run server. So I'm going to click on the server, and it's going to open the Django project. You can see we have Django, which is this install works successfully. Now, what we need to do is to, okay, I need to come to HTML and pass in just a simple message. Let's say, hello, Kobotoolbox. So I've passed in this. Now the URL is intact. I've passed in the information, which is home.html, into the URL. And Django project is aware that I want to pass in information to the HTML. So what I need to do is to run Python again. Now Django is aware of the information. So now we have hello Kobotoolbox. You can see I've passed in the information into the HTML, into the web interface. So if I go back to home.html, if I add, let me add another thing, probably hello world. And it's going to pass in this information to the web interface. What I need to do is just to reload, and you can see I have the information. Now we've successfully passed in a simple information into the web interface. Now what we need to do is to consume the API, the Kobotoolbox API. So what we need to do now is to go to the Kobotoolbox API. In the Kobotoolbox API, I want to deserialize this URL, this JSON format. I want to deserialize this JSON format and consume it and render every information in the URL into the web interface. So what I need to do is just to copy this. I need to copy this. Then I'm going to go to the views. So I'm going to clean this. Now, what I need to do is, first of all, is to import JSON. I'm going to use import JSON. I also need to import the request. Now, after that, I need to pass in information of the URL into an object. So I'm going to call it Kobo is equal to request, which is this request, dot get. I want to get information from the URL and pass it into the Kobo. Now I'm going to use apostrophe paste the URL dot JSON. So we copy this and I paste it into the request. So I want to get this and pass it into the Kobo. So I copy the URL, the first URL, then I remove the backslash dot I inserted .json into the URL. Then the next thing I'm going to do is to pass in the header. So to pass in the header so that it will be able to consume the API, we need to pass in the header, the token. So I'm going to come to this place and say that header equal, I need to open a map. Then apostrophe authorization, map it into token. So I need to look for the token. So to look for the token, I need to clear this and type in token. So this is the token of the form. So I need to copy the token. So I'm going to copy the token and paste it. You can see a space in between this. It's a single space in between the token and the values. So this is, we've passed in the authorization into the header. So I need to pass in the header into the get request. So I'm going to use comma headers equal header. Now, this is a way to deserialize this JSON, Kobotoolbox JSON. Now, what we need to do again is to pass in this Kobo and load it into, we need to pass it into an object by consuming the information we have from the Kobo. We want to consume it and render it on the web interface. So I'm going to call it API equal JSON dot loads. I want to load the Kobotoolbox. I want to load the Kobo URL dot contents. I want to load all the content in the Kobo URL. Now I want to pass it into the web interface. So the next thing I'm going to do is to pass in this API into the context, because we want to pass in the context into the web interface. So I'm going to say that context equal open a map, passing the API. So we've passed in this context API. So I'm going to take this context API, including the request, into the web interface. Now I'm going to use return render open bracket request. So the request is going to go to the interface, and I'm going to pass in home.html. Then I'm going to pass in the context. So this is a way to, this is just like a 10 lines of code to deserialize API and pass it into the web interface. So we've successfully deserialized this API. So this API will be passed into the web interface. So this is just the simple logic to use. So the next thing we are going to do is to go to the web interface. So what we need to do is to go to home.html. Then I'm going to use h3. Let me clean this and use h3. So what do we want to pass in? We want to pass in this API into the web interface. So let me go to the Django project. The Django API again. So I'm going to use API/v2. So what I want to display on the web is the submission count. I want the submission count to display on the web. Let's say immediately respondent fill a form is going to be added to the count, and that count will be displayed in real time to the web interface. That's what I want to do. I want to show the number of counts, the number of respondents on the web interface. So I'm going to copy this deployment submission count, which is not static. So I'm going to go to the web interface. Then I'm going to use a Ginger format of Django. Open double curly bracket. Then I'm going to pass in the API. This particular API, I'm going to pass in the API and say that API dot deployment submission count, which means that the URL which has been passed, which has been deserialized into the API. Now in the API we have the deployment count. I want to render the deployment count on the home.html, which is this. So now if I should save and run server, okay, I don't have it display, so let me just clean it again. Let me look for something like, let me say, API.name and see what is going to display on the screen. So I don't have any information. Probably I need to run server again. Let me click on Python manage.py run server. Let me see, is there any problem? Now you can see the JSON format of the form on the web interface. So we've successfully passed in all the information into the web interface. Now what I need from this is just let me use name for instance to look for the name of the API of the form. You can see the name of the form is called the Django API. So what I want to pass is the count. I want to pass in the submission count to the web interface. So I can just use dot paste this and save, then reload. You can see we have two. Now what we need to do now is, if I should come to this and I try to add another information, let me name it Davido, type in the mail davido@gmail.com, country, let's use Nigeria, and click on submit. And let's see what's going to happen on the web interface. So you can see 3 submissions. So if I should go to this and reload, you can see 3 counts. Now we have 3 counts. So if I should add any information in real time, if I should add any information to the form, it's going to display on the web interface in real time. That is how to pass information from how to deserialize Kobotoolbox API and render it on the web interface. Now, let's say that you want to pass the actual information to the web interface. Let's say you want to pass the name of respondent, you want to pass the email account of the respondent, you want to pass the age, you want to pass other information, probably to develop a dashboard. You can also do that with Kobotoolbox API. You can do whatever thing you need to do or whatever information you need to pass to your users. You can do that with the help of the Kobotoolbox API. So how are we going to do that? Now, we make use of the V2 API. Now, to render the actual information to the web interface, we need to make use of the V1 API, Kobotoolbox V1 API. Kobotoolbox V2 API allows us to render information probably to Google Sheets to connect with third-party applications like Excel, like Power BI, like Google Sheets, like Tableau, or whatever applications that you want to make use of. But if you want to pass the actual data, you want to go through the comprehensive detail to find out the actual data and render it on the web interface, we need to make use of the V1 API. So I'm going to open the V1 API. So I'm going to probably use let me paste Kobotoolbox response / V1 API. Now on the V1 API, this is where the V1 API API root is. So what we need to do is to come down. We come down to we go to the API V1 data. So I'm going to click on this and it's going to take me to the data list. So you can see on the data list, if I should come down, I'm going to see the actual data that we are working on. So I'm going to click on this, which is this Django API. So if I should come down to the last, you can see the information. The dummy data we passed into the Kobotoolbox backend. The first information I passed in was my name and my Gmail account, the country, the second information I passed in the name Burna Boy, email Burna Boy at gmail.com. The third one is Davido at gmail.com. So if I should let me pass in another information. Let me pass in keys Daniel. Keys Daniel. So for the mail, I'm going to pass in Daniel at gmail.com. And for the country, I'm going to select Nigeria, and I'm going to click on click on submit, and it's going to be on the record queued for submission. So let's wait. See, Django 5 was successfully submitted. I think that was a mistake. But if I should go down to this, I try to reload, the information is going to display. You can see Kiss Daniel at gmail.com, country Nigeria. And if I should reload this, okay, I need to go back to my API, save the API. So I need to clear off this. Python manage.py run server. New connection error. So let me quickly delete this, and let me delete this. So you can see the information. Now, what I need to do now is to go to this. So I'm going to make use of this API to render the information. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to copy the URL, and I'm going to change this information. I need to clear off this. I need to change this. I'm going to delete this and paste the new information, which is this. So I'm going to use .json. So let me save. So after saving, the next thing I'm going to do is I'll go to the home.html. Then to render this information, to render this particular information, the information we have here, to render it on the web interface, what I need to do is to go to the home.html, and I'm going to, under this, I'm going to clean this. Let me just clean this. Let me clean this. And I'm going to say that I'm going to use Ginger format, which is double open curly brackets, double percentage. I'm going to say that for I in API, in the views, we have the API. So every information in the URL has been passed into the API. So the API has been passed also into the vendor, and the vendor takes in all information in the URL and pass it into the home.html. So what I need to do is to go to the home.html and say that for I in API, more or less, like, let's say that you have a crate of egg and you have 24 eggs inside the crate, and you need to pick all the eggs one after the other. So in programming, we say that for egg in crate, print egg, which means that we want to print every egg inside the crate. So that's just the function, the for loop. So I want to look for every items inside the API, every item inside the API. So now I'm going to use this Ginger format, which is for I in API. Under it, I need to use Ginger format again to end the for loop. And I'm going to say that end for, to end the for loop. Now, inside the for loop, I want to get I want to get the name. I dot name. So I'm going to copy the name dot name. So I want to get every name inside the form. So I want to get all the names inside the form. So that's just the simple logic to get all the name inside the form. So I'm going to save, and I'm going to save. Let me click on it. And you can see the name inside the form. It picks all the name inside the form. You can see Shehu, Burna Boy, Davido, and Kiss Daniel. So if I should go back again, let me go back again. And I want to pick, let me say I want to pick the male. So I'm going to copy this, go back to this, home.html. I'm going to clear this and paste it here. Then save. So it's going to look for all the email inside the form. So let me just save and go back to the form. You can see I have Shehu at gmail.com, Bona at gmail.com, Davido at gmail.com, Daniel at gmail.com. So I can pass in all the information inside the form and render it on the web interface. So that is how to render data from Kobotoolbox to web interface. Thank you.